I also would start to reference your leg and your hip relative to your ankle. No hip rotation from this camera would keep your hip right over your ankle. Hip rotation from here would get your hip behind your ankle. So from this angle, I want to feel like my hip starts over my ankle. That'd be like this line here. But I want is immediately as I start down to get my hip back behind. So it's like back and around, get my hip behind my ankle. That gives me the depth and the turning pieces. Hey guys, Eric here, back outside at the Bethlehem Golf Club, back up in Bethlehem for the summer. And in today's video, we're gonna talk about how to clear your hips in the downswing and how to do it the correct way. Now, before we dive in, guys, I want to make sure you are aware that we are still running our 30-day money-back guarantee at CogornoGolf.com. And the reason we're doing that is because I want all of you guys to try us out. Send your swings in, allow us to build you a customized practice plan, identifying the specific root causes of your faults, what drills to do, how many reps to do, what days per week, and have all the support within the community that you need to really take your game to the next level. We want to make it completely risk-free. That's why we're going to continue running this. We'll put the link to Cogorno Golf down below. I would love to work with you there. Also, guys, as you are watching today's video, if you would, just click that little gray like button. That really helps support our channel. Would appreciate that. So clearing the hips during the downswing, right? One of the things we see all the time, both at Cogorno Golf with online lessons or whether I'm working with someone in person, is a lot of people aren't able to clear their hips. Now, why they're not able to clear their hips could be a slew of things that happen earlier on. Lots of times it could be as simple as a little setup balance point issue, could be a shaft that gets too steep, could be a face that gets too open, right? Your brain's not allowing your hips to open because it's fixing something that's happening earlier on. So you want to make sure you check those points before we start to dive into today's feels. If you have all those set and you're good to go, this will work right away. If not, again, that's where maybe you want to send your swings in or find a good coach to work with. Make sure your club face is square enough, make sure you're pitching the shaft on plane, and then these things will work. You're not going to be fighting your brain nearly as much. But what I want to talk about is what I really like to think about or feel in terms of clearing the hips. The first one is a general concept that helps me and the people I work with a ton. I just have a 7-iron here, but let's say you take your normal setup, and I want to imagine the golf ball and my hip. Let's say there's a string attaching the two, my golf ball to my hip, and let's say, just throwing a number out, let's say it's 3 feet away from it right now. And maybe that string is a little bit loose, right? There's some room. What I want to feel like is during my downswing, I get my left hip as far away from the golf ball as humanly possible by impact. So my hip starts here, let's say it's 3 feet. During my downswing, right immediately from the start, I want my left hip to get as far away from the golf ball as possible. So if there's a string on it, I want to feel like I'm lengthening that out or tightening out that string during my downswing. As far away as humanly possible. And that's really the concept that I want to feel if I'm trying to clear my hips. Think about it this way. What does not clearing my hips look like? Let's say my hips are 3 feet from the ball. I go up to the top. Let's say I have no hip rotation. How far are my hips from the ball still? Still 3 feet. Now what happens if I have hip rotation? 4 feet. So by me getting my hip back farther from the golf ball and my hip pushes back, inevitably I get the hip rotation, right? So I've got that string on there between the ball and my hip, and I'm pulling that string, I'm tightening that string, getting my left hip as far back away from the golf ball as possible. Let's do that again with the 7-iron. As far away as possible. Yeah, that feels really nice for me. And of course, this is something that's going to work with all clubs. We'll get to that in a minute. Do some sandwich and some driver, but I also would start to reference your leg and your hip relative to your ankle. No hip rotation from this camera would keep your hip right over your ankle. Hip rotation from here would get your hip behind your ankle. So from this angle, I want to feel like my hip starts over my ankle. That'd be like this line here. But I want, immediately as I start down, to get my hip back behind. So it's like back and around, get my hip behind my ankle. That gives me the depth and the turning pieces. So I feel like I've got that string on there. I'm getting it as far away as possible, and I'm getting my hip behind my ankle. Let's do that again with a 7-iron. Now, I can do that with a 7-iron. The same thing would apply if I'm hitting a sand wedge. I might not rip it open as much if I'm doing a little shot, but I can. But certainly if I'm hitting a longer, a full swing sand wedge shot, I feel like my hip is 3 feet. I'm gonna pull it farther back and get my hip behind my ankle. Same thing sand wedge. And all of these swings I'm doing, it's right away to start the downswing. When I go from here, I wanna feel like that hip starts pushing back immediately. And there's several ways to feel this. Let's go back to the 7-iron when I start down. But I like that little string sensation. And again, the hip, my hip starts, of course there's some shift. So my hip's working forward towards my ankle. It's working around to the left, and it's working back behind my ankle. It's working forward towards my ankle laterally. It's working around, and it's working back this way. But I think that string sensation, you can get those all for one, immediately from the start of the downswing. String's 3 feet, let's make it 4 feet. Okay, so the next question always right is, Eric, can I do this with my driver? And the answer is of course. Of course I can do this with my driver. I want to do the same piece. So my hip starts a little farther. Obviously I'm farther from the ball. Let's call it 4 feet. And as I go back, I want it to be 5 feet. So as my hips are working forward, they're working around 4 to 5 feet. I'm pulling that string. What a good visual, right? If you can imagine that. Pulling that string farther, I start immediately to start my downswing. Yeah, good. I pushed that one a little bit, but that hip rotation was good. Let me do that again. Now, as I'm doing these and I'm feeling this, I want to feel like my hip, again, back behind my ankle, 4 feet to 5 feet. There's always this little bit of race or timing between my hands and my body. So I am feeling like I'm trying to get this hip to win the race. If you're someone who can't clear your hips and you have like no hip rotation and you need more, right? The best players in the world have the most pelvis rotation, and you have more and you need more, well then you don't want to be shy with this. You don't want to have your arms and hands beat your hips to the ball. They're already winning the race. You're already not clearing your hips. So you want to let your hips have a head start relative to your arms and hands. Now, is that going to cure everything? No, of course not. You still have to have the club face square, right? You still need to get the club on plane like we talked about. But from here as I go, I want to feel the same things. And if anything, I'm going to feel like I'm trying to keep this butt of the club to the right of my body as I'm getting those hips opening. I want to let my hips get a little bit of a head start. My arms and hands will feel like back a little bit, and my hips are leading the way. Pull that string from 4 feet to 5 feet. Yeah, that's solid. So that's how I would start my hip rotation. Okay, you can do this with all clubs. The string line, right? Getting the hip behind the ankle. You want to feel your hip works forward towards your left ankle and back around her. And you can feel the same sensation with your belt buckle. If I come in here and I feel my belt buckle start to point forward towards my left ankle and back, and if you're having a hard time clearing your hips, you can feel like your hands and arms stay behind your body a little bit as you do that. If you guys enjoyed this video, like I said, smash that like button from earlier, please. We're gonna put a little card on the screen that has more about hip rotation. We'll also put the link to Cogorno Golf. That's where you can go send your swings in. We can work together and improve your golf game. We'd love to see you there.